We are tracking major developments in Israel's assault on Gaza. Today, the Israeli military told Palestinians to move further south, quote, for their safety. And as we have seen, there are no safe zones in the Gaza Strip. It comes less than a week after Benjamin Netanyahu doubled down on plans to continue the onslaught on Gaza, with reports that he even suggested reoccupying the entire strip. It also comes as outrage grows over Israel's continued killing of Palestinian journalists in the enclave. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 184 journalists have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. One of the most recognizable being 28-year-old Al Jazeera journalist Anas al-Sharif. He and 5 other journalists were killed Sunday in a targeted Israeli airstrike. Israel has accused him, of course, without any evidence, of working with Hamas. On Wednesday, CEO of the Committee to Protect Journalists, Jodie Ginsberg, wrote an op-ed in The Guardian saying, quote, Israel is wiping out Gaza's journalists, and it is no longer even hiding it. And Jodie Ginsberg joins us now. I want to pick up on that point that we just closed out with, that Israel is no longer hiding it. How did you come to that conclusion? I mean, I think it was plain to see for everyone over the course of the last 2 years that there was a systemic targeting of journalists, a deliberate targeting of journalists on the ground, Palestinian journalists and media workers as well. But it carries much more weight that it has now come from you, and I'm curious as to how you made that determination.
So we have determined in a number of cases, probably at least now 26, that we believe Israel to have deliberately targeted individuals, knowing full well that they were journalists. And as a reminder, journalists are considered civilians in a war setting, so to kill them deliberately is a war crime. What happened on Sunday was not simply that Israel targeted Anas al-Sharif, whom they accuse of being a terrorist, without providing any credible evidence, but they also killed 5 other journalists. They were all working together in a tent, housing journalists, known to be journalists, and it hasn't even tried to justify those killings. So put aside Anas al-Sharif, Israel targeted a tent containing journalists, 5 journalists whom it killed, and it hasn't even tried to give any kind of explanation for why it saw fit to kill those journalists. That's a war crime.
When you say that it's a war crime and you talk about the fact that there's been no real explanation offered, what's the process that is supposed to take place to investigate and then to address the notion of having violated these rules where you're not supposed to have journalists in harm's way in this way, but particularly when it's done deliberately?
Well, so let's start at the beginning. At the outset, it is both warring parties' duty under the rules of war to protect civilians. That includes journalists. So in the first place, they are not to be deliberately targeted. If they are in some way targeted, attacked, there should be a transparent investigation. We've not heard of such an investigation, although countries like Germany, a strong ally of Israel, has called for such an investigation in this specific case. But we've not seen that in any of the other targeted killings, and we've certainly not seen that across the board for the 184 journalists who've been killed in Gaza since the start of the war, a number that is entirely without precedent. It is the deadliest conflict for journalists that we have ever documented at CPJ, and we've been doing this work for 3 decades.
What does it mean for the world, for our knowledge of what is happening in Gaza, that 184 journalists have been lost, and then also that we still cannot go in? So MSNBC, we tried, we cannot send journalists in. Our colleagues, friends, peers at CBS, ABC, it's the same all over the world. What could be done to change that? Is there anything, a pressure campaign, any sort of political lever to change media access on the ground there?
Well, you're right. I mean, I mentioned that we've seen an unprecedented number of killings. We've also seen an unprecedented situation in which not a single foreign journalist has been allowed independent access to Gaza since the start of war. That's unheard of. I have been a journalist for 25 years. I have friends who have covered pretty much every single major conflict of the last 2 decades. They all say the same thing. They have never experienced anything like this shutout.
And has Israel ever provided a reason for that?
Israel says it's because they can't guarantee the safety of journalists. But, you know...
Well, it doesn't help that they're also killing the journalists.
Well, organizations like MSNBC, like the BBC and others have for decades been working in extraordinarily difficult and dangerous circumstances. Those organizations know the dangers of operating in a war zone, and they take the risk knowingly because, and this answers your question, it's really important that we have access for journalists during a war. Truth is always the first casualty in a war. It's really critical that we have as many independent media in there as possible to tell the world what's happening. Gazan journalists have borne the brunt of that reporting for nearly 2 years, and they're being accused of being terrorists, they're being accused of being partisan, and having to get up day after day and do that reporting in the most impossible circumstances. They are starved, they are continuously displaced, they're working from incredibly precarious settings, and they're being targeted.
And the world will never be able to say that we did not know because of those Palestinian journalists on the ground.
We cannot say that we didn't know what was happening.
Absolutely.
Jodie Ginsberg, thank you for speaking out
Thank you,
for
Jodie.
our field.
Thank you.